Hi, this is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. The rain's nice, isn't it? Sometimes the deck seems stacked against us, that no matter what we try to do, nothing will work for us or free us or ease our burden. And sometimes we employ means of last resort to keep our head above water, perhaps even to stay alive. This is the case with Paul as he appeals to be heard by Caesar in Rome. The governor Festus can't find anything that Paul's guilty of in order to justify his being imprisoned or put to death, even though Paul has been held a prisoner for more than 2 years. But inasmuch as Paul's appeal to Caesar keeps him alive, it also keeps him a prisoner, as we see in our devotion for July 24th, 2020, from the book of Acts, chapter 26, verses 13 through 27. Now when some days had passed, Agrippa the king and Bernice arrived at Caesarea and greeted Festus. And as they stayed there many days, Festus laid Paul's case before the king, saying, "There is a man left prisoner by Felix, and when I was at Jerusalem, the chief priests and the elders of the Jews laid out their case against him, asking for a sentence of condemnation against him. I answered them that it was not the custom of the Romans to give up anyone before the accused met the accusers face to face and had an opportunity to make his defense concerning the charge laid against him. So when they came together here, I made no delay, but on the next day took my seat on the tribunal and ordered the man to be brought. When the accusers stood up, they brought no charge in his case of such evils as I supposed." So Festus here is explaining to King Agrippa the question about Paul. Now this is Marcus Julius Agrippa, also called Agrippa II, and he would like to hear from Paul himself, as we'll hear in a moment. He's a Jewish king, and he has an incestuous relationship with his sister Bernice. Man, I tell you, these guys can't stay away from bad relationships. You had the one marry his brother's wife, and John the Baptist hated that. And now this one has an intimate relationship with his own sister. It seems they excel at breaking commandments and sinning. Festus tells the king that the Jews didn't present any charges that were evil enough to warrant imprisonment or death. And yet, as I pointed out, Paul has been kept a prisoner for more than 2 years on charges that don't warrant it. Rather than they had certain points of dispute with him about their own religion and about a certain Jesus who was dead, but whom Paul asserted to be alive. Being at a loss how to investigate these questions, I asked whether he wanted to go to Jerusalem and be tried there regarding them. But when Paul had appealed to be kept in custody for the decision of the emperor, I ordered him to be held until I could send him to Caesar. Then Agrippa said to Festus, "Well, I would like to hear the man myself." "Tomorrow," he said, "you will hear him." So Festus gives a pretty good accounting of Paul's circumstances to King Agrippa, who would like to hear Paul himself. And so they set the time and day for the next day. Verse 23 and following. And so on the next day, Agrippa and Bernice came with great pomp, as people of power and station tend to try to do. And they entered the audience hall with the military tribunes and the prominent men of the city. Then, at the command of Festus, Paul was brought in, and Festus said, "King Agrippa and all who are present with us, you see this man about whom the whole Jewish people petitioned me, both in Jerusalem and here, shouting that he ought not to live any longer. But I found that he had done nothing deserving death." Okay, a quick comment here. Didn't another Roman governor hear a case made by a certain Jewish carpenter? And also, weren't the Jews trying to kill him? And didn't that Roman governor find nothing of this, that would make this man guilty, especially of death, and yet, he washed his hands of the whole situation and let the man die. Yeah, I mean, it sounds just like Pilate and Jesus, doesn't it? But what happens here? And as he himself appealed to the emperor, I decided to go ahead and send him. But I have nothing definite to write to my Lord about him. Therefore, I have brought him before you all, and especially before you, King Agrippa, so that after we have examined him, I may be able to have something to write. For it seems to me unreasonable in sending a prisoner not to indicate the charges against him. Yeah, I would think that would be pretty unreasonable too, don't you? Hey, here's a prisoner. We don't know why we're holding him. We don't know what he's done wrong. We can't figure that out. So we sent him to you, and maybe you can. I don't, that just rubs me the wrong way. Do you get the feeling that the deck is kind of stacked against Paul here? I mean, they recognize that he shouldn't be imprisoned and certainly not put to death, but they're not going to let him go. There are those in our society who feel that the deck is stacked against them. They feel that because they're poor, or because of their skin color, or because of their education level, to name just a few possibilities, perhaps who their parents were, things like that, that the deck is stacked against them, that they can't get any justice, that good things don't happen to them, life is especially hard for them. Have you ever felt that way? Like the cards were stacked against you? For a job, for a loan, for something else? It's a terrible way to feel and a horrible injustice to experience firsthand. When you feel this way, remember that the Lord is still in charge, and the Lord will exact justice for you should injustice occur. Trust in the Lord in all circumstances, and don't try to exact any justice on your own hand. Leave justice to the Lord for each day. Paul has placed his fate in the hands of the Lord. He did that before this moment. He did that even before Damascus. He did this as he grew up and became a Pharisee. He placed his life in the hands of the Lord. And now, through the grace of Jesus Christ and placing his hands in Christ's hands, well, now, through his faith, he is experiencing what it means to believe without seeing, to completely give yourself over to the Lord, who is the potter still shaping us. It's interesting that Paul could have been set free if he hadn't appealed to Caesar. But now he has an opportunity to go to Rome, and he has a whole new audience to present the gospel. God works in mysterious ways. He won't let Paul down, and he's not going to let you down. Go in peace. Serve the Lord.